Hey, it's Justin Harvey. Thanks for tuning into the Anesthesia and Pain Management Success podcast. With APM Success, we take a close look at important topics pertaining to business, practice management, personal finance, and careers for anesthesiologists and pain management physicians. We work hard to take your critical questions straight to the experts. Thanks for listening. Hello and welcome to episode 175 of APM Success. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Dr. Joseph Galura. He is an anesthesiologist currently practicing in Loma Linda. He's also an Air Force reservist, and he's here to help me understand, as someone who's heard a lot about this, but I'm still very confused, all the different career paths and options and trajectories for physicians in the armed services. So Dr. Galura, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Justin. Glad to be here. Listen to your podcast for a while now. Just super happy to be here. Thank you.
For starters, I noticed I see a guitar headstock in your background. Are you a musician?
Meddling musician. My brother is a professional musician in Hawaii. So he tells me what chords to play.
Nice. I have an electric guitar in my basement that has been gathering dust for a little while now. It's amazing what launching a business and, being a physician spouse, physician household, and having a soon to be 3-year-old running around.
Right.
What it does for your capacity to practice.
Right. Well, this guitar here, it's gathering dust also.
Yeah.
I graduated from residency 14 years ago. And there was a spike in income, as you know, as a new attending.
Yes.
And my wife knew that also. So we were at my children's grade school, and they had the annual gala. And so there was a silent auction. And this guitar was sitting there. And I think it cost $900. And my wife won the bid. And why did it cost $900? It's not a Fender Stratocaster, it's a knockoff. It's because the Jonas Brothers signed the Woodstock in the pick guard. And I said to myself, the Jonas Brothers are never gonna have career longevity. And that was 2009, here we are on 2023. And yes, they are A-list celebrity pop stars.
That is pretty incredible.
But I think it's been plugged in once into an amp, and it actually sounds pretty good. I don't think I've ever changed the strings. That's how often I play it. I think when my brother comes over from Hawaii, I think he plays it. So I leave it out for him. For display when I'm on podcasts.
That is a pretty good story. I got to say, I did enjoy the Jonas Brothers documentary, which was on Amazon Prime. So guys, we'll link to that one in the show notes. Why not? apmsuccess.com/175. I think it's called Road to Happiness. I enjoyed watching that one.
That's a great title right there. So I'm probably going to watch it.
So tell us a little bit about your background, professionally and clinically, and where does your involvement in the military kind of come into play?
Okay. I work at the VA Loma Linda. Like I said, I graduated from residency about 14 years ago already. Unbelievable. My first job out of residency, I'm here in Southern California, just outside of Los Angeles. My first job out of residency, I spent 8 years at San Bernardino County Medical Center, also known as Arrowhead Regional Medical Center. So wide catchment area, pretty much knife and gun club. So that was 8 years of that. And then just got a little tired of the trauma lifestyle. But it was a great learning opportunity. But being a veteran, I knew that maybe I was going to move to the VA. And so that's where I've been the last 6 years, taking care of our veterans at the VA Loma Linda Medical Center. They made me an assistant clinical professor through Loma Linda University. So I work with residents and students, and that's just incredibly rewarding. But my military background, I wasn't ready for college, not ready for prime time in high school. So this wise guy by the name of my father said, why don't you take a look at the military in my junior year of high school? That's what he told me. And then senior year comes around and he goes, what's your plan? We are 6 months away from graduation. And I'm like, I think I'm going to join the military. Dad's plan. Anyways, Dad grew up in the Philippines next to an Air Force base, an American Air Force base. And he's the one who suggested, why don't you take a look at the Air Force? So lucky for me, I had enough intellect to do well on the military entrance exam to get into the Air Force, thank God. And did well enough to get a job in the medical field in the Air Force. So 2 months after graduating from high school, I left for Air Force basic training, and I spent 6 years on active duty. So 6 years on active duty. And I think during that time, it was just adventure, and I wanted to travel. And that's one of the big reasons I joined the military and the Air Force. And so my first assignment took me to the great country of Texas. And it was a phenomenal assignment in San Antonio, Texas for I'd say about 2.5 years. And then I was lucky enough to get stationed in West Germany for the remainder of my active duty time. I was it was during the Cold War, so it was West Germany then. And that was definitely an adventure, and just had Uncle Sam paid for everything. I lived off base. Uncle Sam paid for that. I think I had every other weekend off, a 3-day weekend. And so my friends and I just traversed, Western Europe. Just a fun time. But after that, after 6 years, it was time to start college. I separated in April of '91 during the Gulf War, after the Gulf War, actually. And so I was doing my general education back home in Southern California, at a local community college. And then maybe about a year after I separated, I kind of started missing the military. And it was just really weird. I guess I missed being part of a team, and I guess I missed wearing the uniform. So I went to an Air Force Reserve recruiter, and they got me in, and I've been in ever since. So that was '91. So throughout undergrad, I was in the reserve. I became an officer after I graduated from undergrad. I went to school to be a physician assistant at first. And that can be a completely different podcast right there. So I was a physician assistant first, and then I decided to go to medical school. So I got into medical school. I was in the reserves during medical school, and then anesthesia residency, and now as an attending. And I think, the big reason why I'm still in is because at every step of the way, I've had these skills that I've been able to give back to the Air Force or to the military. And that's why I'm still involved today, because I had these critical skills that I know can help our service members in time of need when the military calls me. I'm a reservist. So that's pretty much my story. So I'm going to say 37 years of military service total. And so when it's time to hang it up, I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, it's such a big part of my life. I mean, if you were to cut me, I'm going to believe this stuff right here, And I know there's a lot of people out there, who are listening to your podcast who've been in the service and specifically Marines, where there's a lot of esprit de corps. If you were to cut those guys and those gals, they would bleed Marine colors, so they understand, and so we're getting into this talk is going to be really Air Force centric, because that's the culture I'm in. There's a lot of different service cultures, and maybe we'll get to talking about that. But in the end, we're all in it together. In the 37 years of service I've been in, I've rubbed shoulders with every service, and I know about most of the cultures, but we're all one team. So
Cool. Well, for any of our listeners, if somebody's hearing this and thinking, "Oh, that's not how it was in the Army," or "That's not how the Navy does it," call me up, send me an email, and we can have you come on and tell
there
your
you
story
go.
too.
There you go.
So yeah, I'll just take this opportunity to say thanks for your service. As I mentioned, my father was in the Marines, and other family members who have served our country honorably, and I have just profound respect for our men and women in uniform. And it's great to be speaking with you on this topic today.
Thank you, Justin.
So tell us a little bit about some of your experience. When you're in Germany or other deployment experiences that you've had, and
Okay.
what was that like?
Well, let me just tell you right now that, there's different classifications of reservists. There's the traditional reservist who does 1 week in a month, 2 weeks out of the year. Okay. So in the last 14 years, I've been in a different category. I'm no longer a traditional reservist. I'm what you call an individual mobilization augmentee, the IMA. I'm an IMA reservist. So I'm attached to the active duty. So I'm a reservist. I do 4 weeks out of the year for reserve duty, but I'm attached to the active duty when I do that. So my assignment the last 5 years has been as a staff anesthesiologist at the 316th Surgical Operations Squadron at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland. So I go there 4 weeks out of the year, usually 2 weeks in the spring, 2 weeks in the fall. So when I go there, I do anesthesia and as a staff anesthesiologist. And when I show up, they know, I've been there for 5 years. They give me my assignment. I go do anesthesia. And I chose that assignment because this is the great thing about the reserve, you're in control of your assignments. So I requested to be stationed in the nation's capital because I'd never been stationed there before in my military career. So I get to take care of some interesting people who come into my ambulatory surgery center, active duty people, retirees, and some of these people have some interesting jobs being in proximity to the nation's capital. Now, I have to be careful when I ask them what they do. They tell me what they do. I'm like, oh, wow. But after I give them the midazolam, it's like, okay, I'm not asking any more questions.
That's funny.
We're not asking any more questions because if you do, they start to spill stuff that we don't need to know, that I don't have a need to know. Yeah. And I always find it just interesting, I had this patient, and he was a 40-year Army guy, officer, warrant officer. And the Army chief of staff, I'm not going to say if he's current or not, would not let him retire. Wow. And you get all these kinds of crazy information from these people. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, no, I'm not. After I give them the I'm not asking any more questions. That's it. But yeah, it's a unique opportunity. That's just a unique opportunity, to be able to take care of any of these people. Mm-hmm. I took care of. Okay, I was in DC. I took care of this retired submariner. He was, I think he was in the Navy for 20 years, and we were talking about submarines and stuff like that. And, we were talking about the Chinese and the Russians and where they're at with their technology, and, and just to gain insight like that. So outside of anesthesia. Yeah. To have access to that. Now, I mean, if you're somebody who's into that stuff, this is a job for you, Yeah. And we have special access. And most of the time, 11 months out of the year, I'm a civilian anesthesiologist. And so for 1 month out of the year, I get access to these guys and be able to rub shoulders with them. Now, how do my active duty counterparts treat me? They treat me like one of them. And so this classification as an IMA reservist for the last 14 years has been very special, being with the active duty. So,
Do the different branches all have like an IMA designation?
um, they do. I don't know about the Coast Guard. Well,
Okay.
but the Coast Guard doesn't have any physicians. Okay, the public health uh, Corps takes care of the Coast Guard, but the Navy has IMAs and the Army has IMAs. So I'd say it's a great classification for reservists to be in. Now, it's not the majority. The majority of reservists are traditional reservists, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks out of the year. So let me think here. We're talking about jobs, right? We're talking about jobs. So now I'm a staff anesthesiologist. And so I chose to be that. But there's other jobs as a reservist that you can do as an anesthesiologist. Now, there's another one. It's called the Critical Care Air Transport Team. Because you're an anesthesiologist, you have had critical care background, you can be the ICU doctor in the sky transporting our sickest patients from the battlefield back to home station. And so that's a pretty big job these days. You're embedded with a critical care nurse and a respiratory therapist. And so you're flying in our big, cargo planes, transporting the sickest patients back. So that's one job that reserve physicians can do.
So you're like running an ICU on a
That's
C-130 or
pretty much
something.
it right there.
That's kind
And
of crazy.
so you can be a staff physician, at your civilian hospital, staff anesthesiologist, and then on the weekend or, on the weekend, your weekend duty, or if you get deployed, now you're wearing another hat. You're the ICU doc, okay? And, you're taking care of, our sailors, Marines, soldiers, Air Force members, and even, one of my colleagues who's a critical care air transport doc, and I'm telling his story, and maybe he's watching this, but he told me one time he was somewhere, and they picked up this CIA operative, a young CIA operative who was all blown up, and he transported her back to the States. So we not only do we take care of DOD, we take care of other stuff too. So and it's very interesting. This is a world, for the people out there. Yeah, this is a special world. If you have the time and you can put the time away and don't worry about the monetary cost, it's a special opportunity.
Obviously, this kind of job attracts some interesting people. You mentioned a general surgeon that you had interacted with in the past. Why don't you tell that story?
Like Justin, we talked about this. A lot of these stories I've rubbed shoulders with in my 37 years of service. At my first civilian job at the county hospital, I worked with a general surgeon, unassuming guy, very nice guy. He was Army Reserve. And during the waning days of the Iraqi war, end of 2008, he voluntarily deployed to Iraq. And when he came back 9 months later, after 9-month deployment, I said, "Hey, you were in theater. How many surgeries did you perform?" He goes, "Oh, I didn't perform any surgeries." I go, "Oh, well, what'd you do?" He goes, "Oh, I volunteered to be a public affairs officer, winning the hearts and minds of the Iraqis and stabilizing their government." I was like, "John, are you kidding me?" And so he was a special guy. And, he's a fully board certified trained burn surgeon, general surgeon. And he didn't want to use those skills in Iraq. He was going for the greater good, of government building and stabilization. And he was able to do that as a medical officer. So these opportunities are so unique. I think From the Army perspective, from his Army perspective, yes, he has these life-saving skills, but first off, you're an Army soldier, and then you're a surgeon second. And I think my Army colleagues out there who are listening, they would probably agree with what I just said, and that another unique opportunity there. Let me see. Go ahead, Justin. I'm sorry.
I was going to say there's a number of ways if someone is looking to pursue a life of public service in this way, perhaps in a it's something they come to maybe a little later on.
Yeah.
There's if it's one thing like, oh, I'm 17, I'm going to enlist and just kind of go from
Right.
build things from the ground up as far as a career
Right.
involved with the military. But for folks who are either in training or maybe in finishing med school and looking at residencies and thinking about, or maybe it's after undergrad, before med school, I want Uncle Sam to pay for med school. Can you maybe describe a couple of the other tracks that you have encountered?
Well, I would say if you've never been in the service before, there is a track for you in the reserves. There are some incentives out there it may not pay for everything, okay, but it could pay a good chunk being in the reserves. I was just doing some research here before we came on, and the reserves, Army National Guard, Air Force Reserve, Air National Guard, Navy Reserve, they all have incentives for reservists who are in training. And those incentives potentially max out at $250,000. And so, private med school these days, $500,000. So if you're willing to do 3 to 4 years in the reserves, you could max out at $250,000 in terms of compensation going towards your student loans. Now, for medical students, I don't know of any programs in the reserve, but I definitely know for residents and newly minted physicians. So those people who have loans, but they don't want to make the reserve a 20-year career, there's incentive to do a 4-year stint in the reserves and have a big chunk of your medical school loans paid for if you meet all the requirements. Okay. And so, I saw that it's tapped out at $250,000. That's a big chunk, and don't know if it's tax-free. Don't know about that. And so those things
depend on if you're deployed, or I know there's some special provisions around.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Where you are when you earn it.
That exactly, so, but those incentives are out there, and I know they exist for residents and newly minted physicians. Don't know anything about medical student, incentives.
So for listeners who are, thinking about this, and we'll assume that they're either residents or further along in training, who want to take a next step, or this is interesting, I want to shake things up. I'm in a rut. I'm 2 years and working for a big private practice, and I'm like this. I'm getting bored, clinically, this isn't stimulating, and I'm having that midlife crisis that you described.
Well,
and I want to investigate further. Where would you recommend that they start?
Well, they have to find a health professions reserve recruiter, not the active duty recruiter, health professions reserve recruiter. And that's your access point. Now, the recruiters are hit or miss. I'm going to say it because everyone knows it. They're used car salesmen. Okay. They just want to get you in. They don't make it easy. This is the federal government, DOD. Things work like molasses. Mm-hmm. Now, the younger you are, new attending, 30-ish years of age, the easier it is going to get in, because they don't have to vet your health, right? Because it's all dependent upon health. Now, if you meet the profile of someone who is 55 years old and has been in a healthcare system that will allow you to go out and be a reservist, and you already have a lot of money, and now you have a lot of time, and now you want to give back. And there's a lot of those people who want to give back. I want to give back to my country. It's going to take a little bit of time to get in. Okay. It's going to take upwards from, if you're in superior condition, you're an Ironman at 55 years old, it's still going to take time for you to get in, because they got to vet your medical. They got to vet a lot of things. So be prepared for a 3-year process.
Wow.
A 3-year process.
Wow.
And so just think about that. It's age dependent. The older you are, the longer it's going to take. The younger you are, the faster you're going to get in. Okay. But the recruiters, it's dependent upon the recruiter. If they're on top of it, they'll get you in faster. If they're not, it's going to take a little while. And so it's really up to the person how dogged and determined they are to serve. And, in doing my research here, I YouTubed, oldest age of, people going into the reserve. I found a 62-year-old neurosurgeon.
Wow. Prominent
neurosurgeon out of Beverly Hills. You can YouTube him. And he joined the Army Reserve at 62. And I'm sure it took a long time for him to get in, but he's in now. There's another Army emergency medicine physician coming in at 53. And, these guys are established physicians. They've got the time now, and they've got the money, and they want to serve. And it took a little while for them to get in, but they're in now. And, they're applying their skills. I was working with a emergency medicine resident the other day, and she knew I was in the Air Force. She goes, "Oh, Dr. Galura, my father was in the Air Force Reserve like you. He graduated from residency, and he said, I have all these skills." He was a trauma surgeon from Detroit Rock City, where the Knife and Gun Club is heavy and fast. And he said, "I have all these skills. I want to give back." So he joined the reserves for 3 years, and he deployed once to Afghanistan and used all his skills. And that's how he gave back, And so, and he's no longer in, but he's a veteran now, and he was able to serve a special community. And so, let me see, what else you got there, Justin? I got some things written down.
Are there any like misconceptions or things that people you think you've observed that they think and that are maybe a little off base?
Okay, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. Now, here it is. We have something called, oh, you're a reservist. Oh, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks out of the year as a physician. That's what you do, huh? You're not really active duty or anything like that. I'm like, wait a minute. Things have changed. In the last 20 years, we have drawn down our forces. The active duty numbers have dwindled down. We're a leaner, meaner military because they've relied more on the reservists. So about, I'd say 20 or 30 years ago, the Air Force started implementing this concept called total force, and they've slowly ramped it up. And now active duty and Air Force Reserve and Air National Guard are seen as one. And so it's almost seamless, especially in the air crew, air crew career field. If you're an Air Force reservist, you could be flying any day with active duty, and you can't tell the difference, okay? And that's how it's going for medicine too. They can plug a CCAT physician, a critical care air transport physician, who is an Air Force reservist, into an active duty billet, and you can't tell the difference.
Hmm.
So the total force concept is here. And so that misconception of, oh, the weekend warrior doesn't hold anymore. Okay. So to the people listening out there, when you sign on the dotted line, you can't sign on thinking, oh, I'm just a weekend warrior. You are a critical asset. Okay. And when they call you up, they're going to call you up and they're going to send you down there for 6 to 9 months. And so this is a serious thing when you sign on that dotted line as a reservist, and especially as an anesthesiologist.
Yeah.
If you're a surgeon, anesthesiologist, any surgical subspecialty, any anesthesiologist, if you sign on that dotted line, you got to make sure they're giving you all the incentives they said they're going to give you, because when the balloon goes up, they're going to call you and you're going to go down there and you have, and wait a minute. I didn't sign. Yes, you did sign up for this. You did sign up for this, And so really, who is the perfect candidate for this? Okay. If you're in private practice, I don't think this is for you. Okay. Because your practice is going to take a hit if you are gone for 9 months. Okay. If you work for a large healthcare system like me, the VA, Kaiser, a huge university health system that can lose an anesthesiologist for 9 months, this may be for you. Okay. But private practice, probably not. I have a lot of colleagues at work who are young attendings, and they always ask me, I kind of want to join the Air Force or the military. And they're young guys and they have toddlers at home. And I just go, no. Can you be away from your child for 9 months? And most of my active duty counterparts who deployed to Afghanistan and had young kids, one deployment and then they were they were done with their commitment. They were out because it was very difficult to be away.
Yeah.
So I'm speaking to the guys and gals who can shoulder that burden of being away and know what the true costs are.
I'm thinking about like the roots of this decision for you, and I'm interested to understand it a little better. And I'm curious, did you, growing up, or your dad growing? So, did you grow up in the Philippines or was it here?
No, I grew up here.
Okay.
I'm
wondering
my
if you
father grew up in the Philippines, and he immigrated here.
I'm curious, did he have any experiences like with the American military or being in proximity to an Air Force base?
Oh yeah,
that
I
sort
mean
of
he's
influenced the way that this culture has been cultivated in your family?
He always wanted to join the military. He actually, I think he went down to he was telling me he went down to the Navy recruiter when he was 16 in the Philippines, and he made it through all the tests. And then they finally asked him, you're too skinny. How old are you? He goes, oh, I'm only 16. And they sent him back home. So he always wanted to join the military. And so, I've been able to fulfill his dreams a couple of times over.
Yeah.
And now, I was the first generation in my family. Now we have the second generation. My son's in the Air Force Reserve.
Oh, awesome.
And he's having a phenomenal time. He's air crew. And so I think for me right now, it boils down to the themes, and maybe I send it out there again. It's service, team, and adventure. That's what this is all about. I was listening to Jesse Ehrenfeld yesterday. He was on Judd Walpau's podcast, ACRAC. And Dr. Ehrenfeld is not, he's the president-elect for the AMA, anesthesiologist out of Wisconsin, young guy. And Jed was doing his bio, and Dr. Ehrenfeld talked about how he was, after he graduated from residency, he wanted that. He wanted to be a part of the military because of the team.
Mhm.
And he deployed as an anesthesiologist to Afghanistan with his team, with his reserve unit. I think he was at Kandahar, and he was in charge. And he said, in the civilian world, you can be in the OR, and it's not the same team every day. But Dr. Ehrenfeld said, when I was in Afghanistan for 9 months straight, it was the same team.
Hmm.
And it's a special bond. And I think what I'm saying, what Dr. Ehrenfeld is saying, it's about service, team, and he got the adventure too, because he was in Afghanistan, And so if you do this, maybe it might be for the money a little bit. There's not a whole lot of money, I would say. Up front there is, but if you do a 20-year career in the reserves, you're going to get a pension at 60. It's not going to be this rip-roaring pension that your active duty counterpart's going to give. So it's got to be something more than that. So it speaks to service. It speaks to taking care. You have skills that you want to apply to a special population, and then you want to be a part of a team, a special team of like-minded people. And you run into these people, and then it's the adventure, that unique opportunities that civilians just don't get, and now we talked about this earlier. We talked about my midlife crisis earlier before he came on. I was 53 years old. My kids are leaving high school, going into college, and a special opportunity came up. And it's called the Special Operations Surgical Team. And this team is an Air Force team that goes out with the special operators. You go beyond the wire, and you're not fighting with these special operators are doing what they're doing, but you're held back just a little bit, maybe 100 meters back, 100 meters back. You're close proximity. You're close proximity. I don't know, But if one of those guys or gals gets hurt, they're bringing them right to you. And so I had an opportunity to try out for that team and just get, a sliver, a glimpse of what special ops is about. I didn't make the team, but I got a sliver of what that is about. They're a special group of people. And one of my guys, it's called assessment and selection. One of the guys on my team who went through assessment and selection, he used to be a Marine officer. And he was in Iraq, and one of his guys got blown up. And so he took his Marine to the aid station. He saw the Navy docks, active duty Navy docks, and Navy corpsmen working on him. And those guys saved his Marine's life. And when my buddy walked out of that tent as a Marine, lieutenant, he said, one day I'm going to be like that. I'm going to be a surgeon. So, fast forward 15 years later, him and I are going through special ops assessment and selection. He made the team. And he's coming full circle. He's a reservist. He's a vascular surgeon, Bill Johnson, at NYU. And he's attached to the Air National Guard SOS team in Pennsylvania. So he's coming full circle, and he's going to be that surgeon taking care of the Marine whenever he has to go somewhere. So special stories that I can share with you, special people who are doing interesting things, and they want to do it because of service. That's what it is. They're not doing it for the money, folks. They're not doing it for the money.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for specialty physicians, it's often a trade down economically. And
Yes.
so the motivations are other than the money.
Yes.
I'm curious, as you think about your various experiences domestically, internationally, all the people that you've met, if you have a moment as a physician where you felt like where the medicine and the military intersect, and you're in this moment of service and clinical practice, and you're doing what you're doing, and you had just a reflection of like, I feel like I'm living out my best life right now, whether it was a patient encounter or something happening with some of your colleagues or
okay. Here once again, I was a medical student, and at this point I was in the Air National Guard because I went to medical school in Arizona, and so I switched over to the Air National Guard from the Air Force Reserve. And it was between first and second year of med school. And I was a traditional, guardsman, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks out of the year. So our 2 weeks, we were going to Japan. We're going to Japan, and I'm going to do a family practice rotation. No, it was between third and fourth year of medical school. So I'm going to do a family practice rotation at Yokota Air Base in Japan. So I'm working with this great family practice doc there, and didn't have much time. It was only 2 weeks. I can only do a couple of things. And so one of those things was climb Mount Fuji. So I did that. We did that with my unit. But I think beyond Mount Fuji, at Yokota Air Base in 2003, they had just redid their runway. The base commander says, on Friday, no one's working. The whole base is going to run the runway. And so my Air National Guard unit from Arizona, we're out there on the runway with the whole base. We're all lined up in military formation, and they got helicopters over the runway filming, and we start running. We had the guide on. That right there is about esprit de corps, teamwork right there. We're running the runway, and I swear to God, I thought we were running for 3 miles. I didn't think a runway was that long, man. But that's what I'm talking about. What you were asking, here I am, a doc. I'm running with all my colleagues. It was the best moment ever. Active duty, Air National Guard, Air Force Reserve, on the runway in Japan, representing our country. It was amazing. Yeah. Those things, I couldn't believe it. I just love it. I just love it. And all the guys out there who are listening right now, who are in the service, I know you've had the same moment too that Justin's talking about.
Sounds incredible. I'm kind of getting goosebumps. I think that's a good note to end on. So, Dr. Galura, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and hearing about your experience. And any, if people are listening and they want to get a hold of you, how can they best do that?
Can we link my my email address?
Definitely.
For the podcast. Yeah, we can do that. They can reach out to me and we can talk. If they're interested in Air Force Reserve.
Why don't you go ahead and shout it out? Just for listeners who aren't going to go to the show notes.
Oh, okay. So the easiest thing is joseph.galura at va.gov.
Great. Galura, Galura.
Joseph.galura at va.gov.
And we'll put all this in the show notes as well, and some of the links to other resources that Dr. Galura mentioned. Dr. Galura, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking
Justin, with you. Thank you so much for talking to me. I hope people get something out of this, because I know people are out there thinking there's other ways to serve too. If you have other questions about that, I can answer that if you reach out to me.
If you liked what you heard this week, head on over to apmsuccess.com, where you can find more content and free resources to help you build a successful career in anesthesia and pain management. If you wanted to leave a review in iTunes, I'd also really appreciate it. Thanks for using some of your valuable time to join me today on APM Success.